This WTF episode is available on the TDG website. Click on the Power Platform Bank. Select the flow category, and it is this flow here. Happy flowing!
Hey everyone, it's Benitez here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's WTF episode, I'm going to show you how you can delay sending a birthday email based on a recipient's local time zone. In terms of the agenda, this is an advanced level topic and I'm going to briefly discuss 2 previous WTF episodes of mine, and then I'm going to show you how you can perform this in Flow. So in episode 9, what I showed you was how you can send an email based on a contact's birthday. So if their day and month of their birthday equals today's day and month, it will go and send an email. And then in episode 10, what I showed you was how you can identify a contact's local time zone using the Bing Maps time zone API. So in episode 9, the restriction that I talked about in there was if you are setting the daily recurrence based on your local time zone, so my time zone is Melbourne and the time I was setting it to was 8 a.m., that means that Flow will send the email out immediately. If that contact is based in a different time zone to Melbourne, such as Seattle, it's not necessarily going to work or make sense because of how Seattle is pretty much 21 hours behind Melbourne time. And so this flow today is showing you how you can delay sending a birthday email based on their local time zone using a combination of 2 flows that I showed you before. Okay, so as usual, no development needed. We are simply using actions and expressions, and once again we are using the Bing Maps time zone API. So let me show you how this is done. So in my flow, this is going to look familiar because the first half of the flow is from episode 9 with a few differences. So since then, what I learned from one of my colleagues who happens to be another MVP in our community, his name is Natraj, so go ahead and subscribe to his blog as well as follow him on Twitter. So back in my episode 9, what I talked about then was how this needed to be in UTC. That's not the case because the flow documentation was actually slightly incorrect, and another document was explaining how this bit actually works. I will link those in my YouTube description down below. So if you actually drop off the Z in here, and if you enter in an hour and minute based on the time zone in here, that will work. Whereas previously I thought you need to enter it as UTC, and that was because the blog post was slightly incorrect. Okay, now the other thing that I'm doing is when I'm converting the time zone from UTC now, what I'm also including this time is the year. So previously I was only pulling through the month and day, but now I'm pulling in the year, and I'll explain why later on in the flow. And so now I have another action that is setting the year based on splitting the value returned from this output. And then I've got my list of records action in here, so it's the same one where I'm using an OData filter where it's just grabbing contacts who have a day and month of today's date, and then I'm using the apply to each, and it's going to loop through. So these 2 actions will look familiar because they are from what I showed you in episode 10, and in this action, what I'm doing differently is I'm not using the Bing Maps action step beforehand. What I'm doing differently is I'm calling my latitude and longitude fields from CES. So I have another flow that I've since updated where every time a contact is created, it will use that Bing Maps action that I showed you in episode 10, and then it's going to store the latitude and longitude return from the JSON response. And then I'm also using my Bing Maps my Bing Maps basic key to retrieve the time zone details of the contact. And then I've got my compose action, which is retrieving the Windows time zone ID property of the JSON. Okay, so then what we want to do now is we are going to have 3 actions. So the next action that we're going to do is we are going to use a convert time zone action. So what this action will do is it will actually set the time of the local time zone of the recipient. Actually, let me try that again, that didn't make sense. So this is where you want to set the time in the recipient's local time zone of when they want to receive that email. And the format that you need to follow in here, once again, is UTC, but you don't need to include the Z. So what I'm doing is I want to insert the year from my action from earlier, which is this one, because we're grabbing the year of the current date so that this flow will always run even when a new year starts. So when we scroll down, we want to grab that action. So that's what I'm doing here, and then we go hyphen. Now you can either use the month or the day from your compose step, that's not a problem. But just to follow what I showed you last time in episode 10, I'm going to use it from the values stored in CDS. Okay, and then this is where we can enter in the hour and the minute of when we want the email to be sent. Okay, so there are 2 contexts that I'm using in this WTF episode today. One is in New Zealand and one is in Seattle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a date and time that is in the New Zealand time zone. So at the moment it is 10 p.m. over there, and so in UTC that's 22, and then over in Seattle right now it's actually 1:30 a.m. Over there. So Seattle is 21 hours behind Melbourne time? No, New Zealand time? Yes, New Zealand time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in the New Zealand time. So let me just put this to 10:30. And then the source time is the local time of the recipient. But rather than typing it in, because we have this compose action in the previous step, we want to select that action. So that is this one over here. And then in terms of the destination time zone, this is important. So if you were to select the Melbourne time zone, which is my local time, this will work, but it's not going to be accurate. And I'll tell you why. When you're using the convert time zone action, it's basically only respecting the standard time. So it excludes daylight savings. So if I were to select Melbourne right now, it would be 1 hour behind and it's not going to be correct. And so what you want to do is you want to use the UTC time zone, because when you convert the source time zone to UTC, it will actually respect the daylight savings time, which I think is pretty cool because historically converting time zones have been very hard. Like if you speak to any developer out there, they would tell you that time zones is one of the most difficult things to master. When you're using the convert time zone action, it doesn't need to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the UTC time zone as my destination time zone. And then once again, we want to enter it in the UTC format. So this is where I can type it in. Okay, so that's that step done. Okay, so the next action that we're going to do is we are going to use a delay until action. So this will send the email based on the time that you've entered in here. And so I'm going to retrieve that output from this action up here. And then this is where we can now send an email. One thing that I do also want to mention is that in the delay until action, it has to be in a UTC format, which is why we're formatting the date and time output as the UTC format in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to quickly set this to 8:30. So let me just change this to 31 and hit save. Okay, so what's going to happen is when the time equals 8:30, this flow will be triggered, and it's going to go ahead and go through all of these steps. So since we have time, I might as well do a quick recap. Okay, so in here, this is where it's going to grab the current date and time of right now. It's only going to return the year, the month, and the date, so it's not going to return any of the time values. And then what my next action will do is it's going to split the values so that I can have separate compose actions where it's simply going to have the day, the month, and the year. And by separating these out, I can use them in two actions. So in this action, I'm pretty much setting the day from the UTC time of now and the month, and I'm comparing that with my two fields in my model-driven app. So again, I went through this in WTF episode 9, and then in WTF episode 10, this is where I showed how you can retrieve the local time of the contact. So in here, we are using the Bing Maps Timezone API, and it's retrieving the latitude and longitude values that are stored in CDS. And then in this action, we are grabbing the Windows Timezone ID property from the return JSON response. And then this is what I showed you. So in my convert timezone action, it is simply converting the time of today's date, and I'm setting the local time that I want the email to be sent based on the recipient's time zone. And so I'm doing that through a delay until action, and then in here I'm sending my birthday email. So it's now 8:31, which is 10:31 New Zealand time. So let's check and see that the email has been sent. And here it is. So if I open this up, it is showing 8:31, so that is 10:31 in New Zealand. And so Reese, who is based in New Zealand, will get this email, but pretend it is 8 a.m. in Wellington. So I think that's pretty cool. I really like this flow because it's something that we haven't been able to achieve previously using Dynamics 365 workflows, and I don't know if it's even possible to use this type of conversion of time zone through the Microsoft Dynamics 365 for marketing app. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to explain to you guys is if I hit back now, we'll see that the flow is running, and if we take a look at the applied each, it's going to appear grayed out. Now, when I was going through this WTF episode, I thought that it was just sitting and it wasn't doing anything, and I thought there was an issue. But thanks to my flow guardian angel, aka John Liu, he actually explained to me that the delay until has processed, and it will send an email out, or it will go ahead to the next action. And any of the other records that are in the applied each, if they have not yet finished processing, this is still going to appear grayed out. But don't let it fool you, because there will still be records in the applied each action that would have successfully completed. Now, until all of the records in the applied each have finished processing, you're not actually going to see the green ticks or the red crosses. So in my mind, it is a bit misleading visually, but if you do have an action that shows a visible outcome, such as send an email, you'll know for sure that it is working. One other thing that I haven't mentioned, which is very important, is if you want all the records in your apply to each to be processed concurrently at the same time, so in parallel, there is a setting that you do need to enable. So you simply select settings and you want to enable the concurrency control, and you can also set your degree of parallelism. And that's it for today's WTF episode. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Twitter. I do want to say thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed and helped me reach my 500 milestone. And Will, I'm looking forward to you making a shepherd's pie, and a massive congratulations to Will, who has also recently been awarded as an MVP. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
Turn up. Let's go.